In the grim darkness of the far future, if you enjoy Diddy sex parties, then you'll enjoy the Emperor's Children. But unlike the Americans who wage war for crude oil, these degenerates would raise entire worlds just to stockpile baby oil, an absolute necessity for the level of orgies they indulge in. But the Emperor's Children doesn't stop at sex. They also enjoy drugs, violence, or sadism. Pick your vice, they'll have you beat. However, they weren't always pleasure-seeking degenerates. Just like all good girls gone bad, they had an origin story. Originally, the Emperor's Children were loyal and noble beings. The earliest batch of these pretty boy recruits descended from noble houses in Europa, which was just a fancy name for future Europe. These aristocratic brats were handed over as tribute after their families got thoroughly curb-stomped by the Thunder Warriors during the Unification Wars. And despite their posh ancestry, the Emperor's Children didn't come off as pricks, as one might expect. In fact, while other legions were being elitist and refusing to lead normies into battle, the Emperor's Children willingly charged into battle alongside them. This earned them the Emperor's loyalty and trust. As a sign of their special status, they were promoted to become his personal messengers and promptly bathed themselves in regal purple because nothing screams elite warrior quite like dressing like Barney. Then came their greatest honor, the Palatine Aquila, a shiny little badge of approval, bestowed upon them after a group of them threw themselves in front of the Emperor to protect him during an attempted assassination. But, as with all good things in the grim dark future, their lucky streak eventually ended, tragically and violently. First, a robotic kleptomaniac decided to rob them. He was a necron that went by the name of Trazyn the Infinite, and he ended up stealing a mountain of their gene seed, presumably to add to his growing collection of things that aren't his. To make matters worse, the remaining gene seed stock on Terra was infected with the blight. Anyone implanted with it suffered catastrophic organ failure. Thus began the slow death of the Third Legion. Their future looked about as bright as Akkadian guardsmen's life expectancy. Unlike Nick Cannon, they couldn't seem to pump out more recruits at a rapid pace due to the lack of functioning gene seed. In fact, they barely managed to scrape together 200 Space Marines, which was a drop in the bucket considering how many were blown up daily. But their savior would eventually arrive in the form of their primarch, Fulgrim. Baby Fulgrim started his life by crash landing on the shitty planet of Chemos, where he was discovered by a group of laborers and they took him back to their settlement. His childhood was a blur of soul-crushing labor, toiling away in what was essentially an Amazon warehouse, but with fewer bathroom breaks. But unlike his co-workers, he didn't suffer, he optimized. By puberty, he was running the place with management skills so brutal, even Jeff Bezos would have taken notes. After Fulgrim finished one corporate takeover, he decided to do the same to the rest of the planet. Gutting deficiencies and optimizing technology, Chemos went from post-apocalyptic Rust server to full-blown cyberpunk utopia in just a few decades. At this point, he had become the de facto ruler of the planet. And in the middle of all this, our boy had a love life more chaotic than a daytime soap opera. Dude collected wives like Pokemon, but according to the gossip circuits, he loved none of them. Possibly because the only thing he truly adored was himself. At some point, the Emperor of Mankind arrived on Chemos, and without a word, Fulgrim instinctively pledged his loyalty to Big E. After the reunion, Fulgrim was eager to reunite with his long-lost legion. He made the trip to Terra, with visions of a grand and glorious legion dancing in his mind. But what he got instead was a pitiful 200 Space Marines, barely enough for a decent pub brawl. Despite this, Fulgrim channeled his inner Obama and spewed a charismatic speech so rousing and so inspiring that even the Emperor himself took notes. Whether out of genuine admiration or sheer disbelief, Big E rewarded the spectacle by naming his tragically undermanned force the Emperor's Children. Now, Fulgrim might sound flawless, but he had a flaw, which was his undiagnosed OCD. He was absolutely obsessed with being perfect. Naturally, this obsession bled into his legion. He encouraged them to perfect everything, from military tactics to art. Fulgrim didn't just want his legion to win battles. He wanted them to be cultured. However, with their embarrassingly small numbers, they wouldn't be participating in any solo battles for a while. So they got lumped in with Horus and his Luna Wolves. This little arrangement wasn't just tactical, it was the beginning of a beautiful bromance between their primarchs. Eventually, recruits from Terra patched up their roster, and they could finally go on their own crusades without playing sidekick. But Fulgrim, being Fulgrim, wasn't content with mere victory. If he was going to kill someone, it had to be a performance. This commitment to aesthetic murder reached new levels of stupidity on Byzas. Fulgrim refused the help of local warriors because that would mean admitting that he wasn't the flawless demigod he thought he was. So, he conquered the planet with just 7 men, a stunning achievement, except for the part where he nearly got himself killed, proving a point no one asked for. At some point, the Emperor's children finally met a species as obsessed with perfection as they were. They were known as the Laer. These Xenos took self-improvement to terrifying extremes, tweaking their genetics and chugging chemicals from birth to fit their jobs. The Imperium actually considered diplomacy for once, worried that fighting the Laer would be too costly. But Fulgrim, ever the humble soul, scoffed at the idea. Humans were the perfect and superior species. The war was expected to last decades, but the Emperor's children wrapped it up in a month, bleeding themselves dry just to prove Fulgrim right, because nothing says superior species like barely surviving your own arrogance. As a war trophy, Fulgrim took the silver blade of Laer. In hindsight, we all know this was the demon's sword that eventually possessed and corrupted him. As the galaxies spiraled into the absolute dumpster fire of the Horus Heresy, Fulgrim tried to talk sense into his old pal Horus. A noble effort, but it ended up in a tragic failure. Instead of changing Horus's mind, Fulgrim got seduced himself, convinced that the Emperor was holding humanity back from true perfection. Of course, it wasn't just Horus's silver tongue at work. That fancy Laer sword Fulgrim had been lugging around was an inside job. It came with a complimentary demon of slaanesh, whispering sweet nothings into his brain until his spine was so spineless that Horus barely had to try. And just like that, Fulgrim's chaos infection spread like a bad STD, first his commanders, then his marines, until the whole damn legion swapped sides to worship slaanesh. The Emperor's children dove headfirst into the carnage, front and center for all the worst war crimes. At the drop site massacre, Fulgrim had one last bro moment with Ferrus Manus, except this time, instead of a heartfelt reunion, he cut off his brother's head while under possession from the Laer blade. To complete the demon starter pack, Fulgrim travels to a crone world with his buddy Perturubo. They have a brotherly dispute, and in the kerfuffle, Fulgrim finally ascends Daemonhood. Dude goes full anime transformation, turning into a massive, fabulous snake boy. Then he just disappears into the warp. After that, Fulgrim would just pop in at random, leading the Emperor's children into battle whenever he's bored, and generally being the galaxy's worst party guest. Eventually, he just retires to an orgy planet, nestled comfortably in Slaanesh's palace. There, he fucks everyone and everything. This planet was so fun, Fulgrim refused to go back. Of course, Horus eventually demands Fulgrim stop his interdimensional hot girl summer and report for duty. Through some convoluted demonic loopholes and true name nonsense, Fulgrim and his entire legion finally make it back in time for the siege of Terra to help the traitors. During the battle, Fulgrim spent more time roasting his fellow traitor primarchs than helping. Meanwhile, the Emperor's children were less allies and more opportunistic pillagers. Nobody could really control them. They treated the war like an all-you-can-torture buffet. In the few battles the Emperor's children did actively participate in, they would ignore the actual combatants and just go on a civilian massacre, torturing and killing them for fun. It was absolute madness. The Emperor's children weren't just committing the run-of-the-mill war crimes. These lunatics figured out how to turn human beings into space cocaine, grinding bodies up to literally snort them. This was followed by flaying civilians alive and wearing their skin as high fashion. To them, this wasn't the siege of Terra. It was New York Fashion Week. Even Gucci execs would have been taking notes. Humanity narrowly escaped annihilation as the heresy ended in the traitors' defeat. The Emperor's children fled toward the Eye of Terror. In their wake, they left a trail of devastation, plundering imperial worlds and enslaving the unfortunate to fuel their Diddy parties. Some descended into noise marines, twisted, frenzied creatures enthralled by destruction. Basically, the sound of death made them bust a nut. At some point, Fulgrim fucks off again and disappears, this time presumably to another orgy planet, gifted to him by Slaanesh. Of course, this is after he murks Guilliman and puts him into a 10,000-year coma. Eventually, the Emperor's children exhausted their stock of slaves and turned their hunt inward. They waged war against fellow traitor legions, sparking conflict within the Eye of Terror. Yet even that was not enough. In time, their lust for excess drove them to cannibalize their own, fracturing the Legion into feuding warbands, their brotherhood lost to centuries of chaos. But apparently, there's hope for them now as they've banded together into the Phoenix Conclave to restore the Third Legion to its former BDSM glory. That concludes today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Please feel free to comment below on which topic I should cover next. If you'd like to support the channel, there's a Shopify store linked in the description for Warhammer LEGO figurines. I also have a Discord if you're interested in joining.